Hello everybody, Nerd here, aka Terrence. This is the pre-recorded video that is going to play at the start of every Devember video. So what day is it? If you're watching this on the day that I recorded it, probably a day in December. What day? I don't know. I'm not creating 31 of these things. This is to tell you that we are working on the Devember project, which is a remote build system in Sublime Text. Now, down in the description, if I have done my job correctly, there should be a link to the playlist that has all of the videos in this series, which starts with the video that describes what the heck it is we're actually trying to build here. And this video will be a minimum of an hour long. I don't know how long it's going to go because I haven't recorded it yet. It's still November right now while I'm reading this to you out of my brain. It's not actually written down anywhere. I think that's probably easy to tell. I'm not very good at talking off the top of my head into a camera. So what are we going to be doing tonight? Don't know. Hopefully working on something really interesting, though. Probably should have thought that through a little bit more. In any case, we're going to go ahead and say the following. If you like these videos and you want to know when there's going to be more of them, subscribe to the channel, link in the description. If you're interested in videos that aren't live in nature, there's another channel I have that is going to be providing those. I have in the past and I will again. I'm just not right now because I'm doing this every day for December and it's taking up all my free time. Link to that is in the description. Like any videos that you find useful. Comment on any videos if you have any questions, and most importantly, have a good time. So let's go ahead and give it to myself in the present, if you will, to continue on faceless, because I don't have the sort of setup that allows me to stream my face while I'm working. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Scary Thursday the 13th. I'm Nerd, and welcome to, did I say Devember? I hope I said December. I might have been thinking of Halloween and said October. That would be a heck of a thing. I mean, I did drink a lot of pumpkin spice chai today, but nevertheless, I'm just leaning off to the right here for a second to verify potential levels of sadness. One of the things that I did today that was Devember related was investigate whether or not .NET Core will run on my MacBook, and the answer is no, because I'm still running Yosemite, which is version 10.10, and it requires version 10.12. Now, I don't necessarily think I'm interested in upgrading past, because this, as I am leaning over here, is a MacBook Pro 15-inch mid-2012 with a 2.3 gigahertz processor and 8 gigs of RAM. I don't know if it's ballsy enough to run Mac OS 10.12. I'm not even sure which one that is offhand. Mavericks, the more recent one. High Sierra. I haven't heard a lot of good things about High Sierra. I do know that this doesn't run nearly as fast as it did with whatever ancient version of macOS it had when I first got it, but nevertheless, that is something to investigate. And also, I made the important discovery that sometime between when I was getting prepared for Devember and now, the version of .NET I installed was 2.1.5. Now there's a version 2.2 point something out, so possibly I want to fiddle around with that at some point as well. I don't know. Sorry for that. As is usually the case, having headphones on makes my ears incredibly itchy for the first little bit. In any case, what is the plan for tonight? Trying to work out this bit of action right here. I figured the most important thing that we can do with regards to our build system, because I do want it to shuttle files over as opposed to assuming that there is it can just access them on the remote host. Because I don't, as I said yesterday, I don't really have the capability for some of the situations I'm using this in. I don't have the administrative rights to be able to set up file sharing, although I do have the ability to run arbitrary servers that I wrote myself. Go figure. But the thought does occur that um, it should be fairly easy to create, say, an extra configuration variable in here somewhere that just says that, remote file system or something, and then there could be some kind of mapping or something along those lines. So I'm not really concerned about that at this point, but since we're going to need to be able to grab files up and shuttle them over, we probably behooves us to look at that. And unrelated to this, I did spend a fair amount of time today synchronizing my user package between all of my various installs of Sublime on my Windows computer out in the living room, the Windows computer on the desk beside me, this Linux box, the other Windows computer to my right, the MacBook. I tend to do most of my development here on the Linux server that I'm streaming from in the general case, because it's the desktop, has the comfortable chair and the good clacky Philco keyboard and the 3-monitor setup. But I do my video prep on the Windows laptop out there, and I end up with, cruft in both of them as I'm answering people's questions. So other than that, a little bit of stuff. I have not actually done much in the way of preparation for today's video. Now, that said, I do know that if I was to actually, since I just did that, I'm going to assume I should quit and restart just on general principles, because I was doing a lot of cleanup in my user package, as I said, and that involved renaming some files, deleting some files. I was doing some merges from multiple machines together, and files were conflicted, and then files came back. Seems like a good idea to make sure we're in a clean state. So, how exactly do we want to proceed with this? And I'm going to say the first thing I might want to do is pop into my override audit window. I have, oh, look at that. It's automatically just in the right spot, I think. Package contents, get packed file contents, get unpacked. What to do? Oh, that's override contents. Is it up here? There's a lot of stuff in here. Unpacked override contents, packed package file contents, get package. I should probably just search for what I think I'm probably looking for. Something similar to that. os.walk. This, incidentally, if you are unaware, I have a package I created. It's on package control called Override Audit. It hasn't been updated in quite some time because there really hasn't been a lot of bug fixing that needed to happen per se, but I do have plans once the new year starts to kick up development into version 2. I think I mentioned this at some point in the past. The version that I'm running here is the BSR, or Big Scary Refactor version of the thing, where the code is nicely split out and reorganized. Command names have been changed. The way they work has changed. I've been testing it for quite some time, and it seems to work just fine, but it is the sort of scary maker, if you will. So that's kind of creepy. And I don't want to break things for people that are using the package if they happen to have things bound, but that's going to have to happen at some time. In any case, this is code that scans all of the contents of a package in the packages folder to find all of the contents thereof. So I want to copy that, and I can close that window. And for our purposes here, this is the file that contains our socket test command. We're going to want a command that can do something for us to tell us files in a window that we can easily run multiple times. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer for the development for tonight and say new plugin, and I'm going to save as this into the Devember package, and we might call it oops. Oh, once again, the magic of this thing confuses and confounds me. Okay, and I called it file gather, so I might call this file gather command. I don't think I want it to be a text command. I think I want it to be a window command, which means that has to go away, and we'll just throw, we might do a print stuff like so. Save that, and I have this file open because I was synchronizing some key bindings that I had set up. These are ones I set up specifically for Devember. I also set up this one for Devember to be able to open the output panel, and I decided that probably by the time Devember is over, I'm going to be so used to hitting that, I probably want to keep that key binding there. So I went ahead and kept that. So we're going to comment out that and throw away this and replace it with file gather like so. And if I hit the key and I had the console open, I can see it saying stuff. So we're definitely doing something. Now that's good because that means we can do it in any window and we can then see how things are going to work. Now let's remember this stuff. We're going to have some path that's a base, and then these values, and we're going to need those to be able to determine, actually, I suppose what we want is this whole shebang right here. There can be one or more of these because there can be one or more folders in a thing in your package. So we might say I suppose we should probably swap all of those for that, and then we can scoot those over. That seems to be okay. And can I reflow those a little? That sidebar really gets in the way. I'm not used to working with the sidebar open, but it does occur that if the file gets long, it's easier to navigate to a file in the stream by dragging it. So I'm going to close that now because we don't care. And here's another copy of spec that we might care about. We can go ahead and shrink those down as well. Now we've got to try and decide exactly how this might work. So let's think about that for just a second while I scratch my ear. Well, realistically, that's not actually my ear. I think I need to utilize the beard trimmer. I'm getting a little shaggy. So when we think about it, what are the use cases that we're going to have? This could, whoops, I have numlock turned on. This could be from a project. This could be from a project. There might be a spec 3 that's just, let's see, if I did window dot that, I get this information. If I say window dot project data, I get all of that kind of information there. Now, if I was to just open a window here and say window.project data, I get a none because there's no project associated with this. And if I say window.folders, I get a list of no folders. So that's good. And if I had one more window and a terminal, and I did this and said subl minus add dot to open that over there, close that because we don't care. I have project data now, even though I don't have a project file, and I also have folders. So this is something that I wanted to investigate because I've never really paid too much attention to that. So we can see just by having a project open, the folders part of the project data, again, if I do that, that one has no project data. This one seems to have project data, and just for our purposes, I guess if I did it here, this one definitely has project data open, right? Because the file is, right here. It's got all kinds of things, including, if I just did that to make sure we can see it, the folders. And the path in here is a dot. It's relative to the folder that the build system is in. And over here in these two, that one doesn't have project data, it has no folders either. This has just the folders, but you'll notice that the path is absolute, even though I added it with a dot in the terminal. And folders gives me a list of folders there. Folders is empty here because there is no folder. And here, folders gives me, again, the full root path of things. We might also want to do research into the unofficial documentation on project structure. And is there official documentation on projects? Official documentation on projects as well. What does the official documentation say? Folders for the included folders, settings, Each folder must have a path key, which may be relative to the project directory, or a fully qualified path. Okay, a list of strings for file names to include. Anything not matching these will be excluded. This is checked before. File exclude, list of file names to exclude. This is added to the global setting of this. Is added to the global setting of the same name. This is checked after file include patterns. All right, so that is something that is interesting to note. Okay, and then there's folder include patterns. This is checked before exclude, and I'd say we don't want to avoid binary file patterns because it's possible a binary file pattern might need to be. Okay, mount points, so we don't really care about that. And if I looked at the one for here, projects reference, I believe is what we want. Incidentally, if you've not read through the unofficial documentation, I would highly recommend that you do so. If you're going to be interested in doing anything package related, it behooves you to read through this once and read through the API documentation once as well. Not necessarily with an eye to ingesting, memorizing, and understanding everything from the get, but more like when it comes time to do something like, say, create a feature that allows you to work on a feature that requires you to know what folders are in a file. If you didn't already know that, window.folders gives you that list. If you at least looked at the API documentation, you might have triggered a memory in your head that, hey, I think there is a API for that. List of wildcard patterns, excluded, included, wildcard patterns, examples. So Folder includes are just going to be name set types, and that's going to be file spec types. So I think the interesting thing we want here is the exclude for both. File exclude and folder exclude is added to the global setting of the same name. I think we should apply that in our code as well. So those were these, right? Include the global in this. Okay. So there's overall ones you can have, and then there's ones that you can just set here. And again, just to clarify for ourselves, we can say that anything that reports folders is going to have project data, even if there's not actually a project associated with it, which makes life a little bit easier for us because we can just call window.project data. And something else to investigate that we might also want to know is if I went to the API help and searched for, what was I just thinking of a second ago? Not folder per se, not include, not exclude, project, file name, the name of the currently opened project file, if any. So that is also something to note. This is the kind of research that we do, so we can run into here and say any window with folders open will always, or with folders open, always responds to window.folders with the list of folders absolute. 2, let's turn that off for the time being. Responds to window dot, have I been calling project data? Yeah, I can never remember. Responds to window.project data with at least the folders key. Additionally, anything with the project responds to window.project file name. So the first thing this is a window command so that we can very easily run it and have it do something for the window that it's in, right? So the first thing we might want to do is grab that list of folder data. And I'm going to move both of these windows temporarily off, of here and over onto my other monitor just so I can have them open to execute commands in. That seems like something that might be handy. Now, as we just said, any window with folders always responds to folders with a list of folders, which appears to be absolute, even if it was a project where the path was specified with period, because as we can see here in this window where this project is currently open, the path is dot, and project data says that the folder's path is dot, and folders returns that. But what we really want to worry about is this project data business. Because that's going to tell us all of the information that we want. We want this key because it'll have the include and exclude patterns if there happen to be any. Which there might not be. So we might say proj data is equal to self.window.project data. Now we can short circuit. If proj data is none, then there's only a single file, right? Say get project data. If this returns none, then the only thing we can do is transmit the current file, if any. And we'll worry about what that actually means in just a second. We can get rid of that now. Otherwise, we have a list of stuff, right? Project data we know is always going to have a folders key. The folders key is always going to be a list. As you'll note, if you watch in this console over here, when I run get project data in the window that has no folder open, nothing happens. If I run window.project data in the one that has a folder but no project, it still has a folders key, only the folder there is absolute. So we might also want that thing that I just mentioned, window.project file name, because that's going to tell us the relative path that the dot returns. So project data is that, and projdir is going to be equal to self.window. I already forgot. Project file name. And what we actually want to do here, well, we're just going to print project data is going to be proj data, and project path is going to be projdir, just so we can see what this thing is doing. Right now, we know, excuse me, that that's going to return something, maybe none, and this is going to return something, maybe none. And what we actually want to do, I think, and I always have to os.path.split whatever this returns, which I guess I could just say window dot project file name. Import OS, just because I typed it in the script. There's not a good way to do that in one shot. We might say if projdir, then projdir is equal to os.path.split projdir 0 to grab the first item. And we'll throw a little bit of this action. So we can see what we have to work with. So here in the window where there is a project, it prints all kinds of stuff. The project path is the local source. Devember, that's right. In the window with nothing, we get a couple of none founds. And in the window with this, we get folders and a none found. So this is the core information that we need to be able to do something. Now, I'm going to say that we probably, for our purposes here, want to define find project files type operation, which takes a list of folders and a project path. I'm going to change the name of these things because that's going to bug me if I don't. Oh, I did one too few. There we go. Now it's unhappy because of this, but that is okay. And we're going to pass that. Now this, what we're going to do here is say if proj data is none, then again, we need to do something there. Otherwise, we need to call find project files and pass it proj data folders. And there's probably one other thing we may want to check out as a potential thing here. And we'll pass proj path here. And that would be if I created just a new window and said project, save project as, and we'll name it Untitled in this, well, we'll put it in my home directory and name it Untitled, like so. Now here in this window, if I did project file name, I get one. If I do folders, the list is empty. And if I do project data, the project data is empty. There are no folders. So that is more or less what we would expect. I'm going to, again, move this over to, whoops, this other desktop so we can just have a handy window for all of the things that might be happening here. I'm going to then say, what exactly do we want to do here? Again, let's expand this project data just so it's more readable. Project path is that. We might say project folders is equal to project data dot get folders to try to get the folders out of the project data if project data else none. Well, see, that's sort of an unfortunate thing, but nevertheless. So get the project data out of the window. The list of folders is the folders key in the project data, none if the project data doesn't have any folders, and also none if project data has is not none. Just so that if there is no project data, this doesn't cause an error. And then we have to do that as a two-step. If project data is none or project or not project folders, we might actually, if not project data or not project folders, then there is no project data or there is no project folder. No folders in an existing project. In this case, fall back to only referencing the, this is shouldn't, we might have to shuffle this a boot, as Canadians don't say, as we decide how we want this to go. Otherwise, now we can go ahead and pass this with project folders. So we might actually be able to do that here. I'm going to say we want a window in this as well, because we may need to make API calls. Thus, okay, now we might also say def files for folder, and that's window and folder and project path, like so. Just to make this easier, and let's say we actually don't need this. Can we get away with not caring about project data in this case? I think we can. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to push this up here and decrement it. If we were given no folders, then there is no project data, or the project contains no folders, so just defer to the current file instead, if any. And here we can just say if not project folders, then what we will return is I want this to be view is equal to window.activeView. We can say if view and view.filename is not none, then return view.filename, return an empty list, like so. Otherwise, well, actually, we might even say files is equal to just an empty list. We might say files.append view.filename and return files. So what is this actually doing? There's an array to store a list of files that this is trying to find. If there's not a project folder, then get the active view. If there is an active view and that active view has a file name, and view file name only returns none when something has actually been saved. So an unsaved file, which isn't on disk, nothing happens. In that case, we can append the file name into it, so it's now that file, and then we go ahead and return it, because if there's not folders, we're only ever get one file, if any. Otherwise, we might say for folder in folders, files.append files for folder window folder project path, and then return files. And if we were going to do that, we might want this to return an empty list. So just to verify what these things do, given a particular folder dict in a window with the provided file, the provided project path, return the list of all files in that folder that should apply to the build, right? Makes sense. And this one is given, it is a matter of fact, we could actually make this smarter by putting this stuff into that and completely pulling it out, but we'll make sure this works before we do that. Given a window, no wait, given a list of folder entries and a potential project path, Return a list of all files that exist at that particular path. Now, let's say, remove that comment because it's pretty sure what that's going to be doing. And we might actually capture the value and say files is equal to that and then print files. So here in this window, if I hit it, global name project, oh, did I nerds it up? What did I do here? I need to see the whole console. In line 77. Oh, I see what I did. This should be folders. How about that? A list of lists, huh? Oh, that's because this should be extend. Okay. Now, this is very useless at the moment, but here in this, we get an empty list. Over here in the window that has folders open, we get an empty list. And the one that doesn't have any, we get an empty list. And if I was to open a file over here, there we see a file name because this window has no folders, but it does have an active file. But if I switch it to the console view in the same window, when I do it, I see that. And basically that was just this file does that, and this file does that for something that doesn't have any content. Now, if we wanted to actually verify that this does something mildly interesting, we might return folder so we could at least see what it's doing. So here in this window, there's one folder and some stuff, and we get that folder entry. So it's actually doing something, right? Over here, when I select this window, this is the window that has folders open, but it doesn't have any project. And there I just get a folder entry with the path and nothing. This is a window that has no folders and no active file. I just get an empty list. In the window that actually has files in it, but this one has no file name because it's the console, empty list. And if I pick the window that has a file that actually has a file name that's backed on disk, we get that one file name. So we are, in fact, doing more or less the right thing and not causing any problems for all of the potential ways that this could be invoked. Now, the next thing that we need to note, and file includes is going to be equal to folder.get file include patterns, and we'll make that an empty list, let's say, and file excludes is folder.get file exclude patterns, and if it doesn't exist, an empty list, and then path includes is folder.get folder exclude, oh, sorry, include patterns, and if it doesn't exist, a little bit of that, and then path excludes is equal to folder.get folder exclude patterns, like thus. And we might say settings is equal to sublime.load settings preferences.sublime settings, and path includes, these are the ones, sorry, yeah, path includes, extend that with settings.get folder include patterns defaulting to an empty array just in case it's not set, and path excludes is extended by the setting for folder exclude patterns, which is also an empty list in case one is not set. And then we might say also that the path is equal to folder.get path. And that's not strictly necessary. I think it automatically defaults to none if you do that. At least it seems to by inference when I test it. And when I say test it, I mean tests I've done in the past, not necessarily what I did just now. Now, for all of those that are curious, this is indeed how I tend to work on algorithms such like this if I'm not immediately sure off the bat how exactly I might want to implement them. I'm going to start by laying out the core structure. Which is that you're going to call this with a window and some folders and a project path so that it can find all of the information that it needs. And it's going to defer to something that knows how to get data for one particular folder. And if we wanted to, we could even go one level deeper in here. But it all comes down to this one call and the command, which makes this command much more readable, does everything that we want. So we might print folder is this. We'll do it the cheap way, which is path, and then we'll print file include mod file includes, and then we'll paste that and exclude, and we can copy that. And oh boy, how unhappy are we that we always notice the copy paste error after we're done copying and pasting. There we go. File, file, file becomes path with no J. My Windows computer is telling me one of my coworkers is going on vacation tomorrow, so that's exciting. And we're going to, I think, throw a quote around that just so that we can see. We're going to need more potential action on that, but we'll worry about that in just a moment. And then we'll return that. So what does this currently do in this project-y type window? It goes kabloom. Global name settings is not defined. Oh, did I? Boy, I bobbled that one. Okay, how about now? Sorry, I got to do it this way. So worried about one typo, you forget the rest. We might also print a line of these just to keep the output separate. Why is file excludes not? Oh, that one doesn't have an S. Oh, that's a bit of an oversight. Wish. Okay. So here we're seeing the thing that we're going to need to fiddle with next. Hang on a second while I use the mouse on a different laptop because that's going to get real irritating real fast. In the window with the project, the folder is dot, and as we can see, there are some path excludes in my project. We might want to verify that that's doing what I think it's doing for other things. In the window that has just a folder open but no project, that one has no anythings and it has an absolute path. This window has, this is the test where there's no folders and no current file. You just get an empty list, and if there's no folders, no project, and there is a file, then you get that. So the question becomes, one thing I want to do is open these settings. File exclude patterns. This seems to have a fair number of things in it. And if that's the case, wait a minute. Folder exclude patterns, file exclude. Oh, did I do it the wrong way? Maybe that's part of my problem. I mean, yeah, they're both excludes, but folder path excludes should be something, shouldn't it? Let's open that in another window so I can, whoops, I can double check. Put that back the way it was. It was wrong, but nevertheless, we'll bring it over here. We'll zoop that window up full screen. I'll even search for patterns. There's file exclude, folder exclude. So I had those things wrong. File includes and excludes, include pattern, folder include, folder exclude. Now, we might say that file excludes, which this one should be file excludes is file exclude patterns, defaulting to that if it's not provided, and folder path excludes should be folder exclude patterns. That really seems like what one might expect. Maybe I did not load these settings properly. Let's just test. That does not seem to have squat doodle in it. So let's try copying, whoops. That. So those are both empty. Da, 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 da. I want this. Okay, and just to be sure, oh, there's a backtick in here, crunk. All right. That will explain some stuff. That was very faint. I should be sitting forward a little more. There we go. Look at all the things that are excluded by default. So here in the project, let's go ahead and comment those out. We'll leave it there for just the time being. And let's go ahead and clear that console. In the one with the project, the folder is dot. There's no file includes. The file excludes, although the project itself, as we can see, doesn't have any of those. It does exclude automatically all of the files like so, because those are my settings. Path includes, there aren't any. Path excludes, oh, sorry, file includes, there aren't any. And file excludes has obj bin and pycache, which are the ones from the project, but it also has the folders from the global one. And as we can see, that's the other information that's there. So we don't actually, what we should actually be returning here, let's say, is path, just to make life a little bit easier. And one other thing that we're going to do here is grab this. Cut it and drop it in this. And we don't need self.window because we have a window. Project folders is the project data we just got. Project path is just window.project. file name, and that, and away we go. Now, in this case, this was calling this with project folders and project path. So this can be project folders and project path, and this can be project folders. And this now doesn't take this information at all. It just takes a window, and this then just takes a window. And that means gathering the files command literally is just one call. Find the files in this window. That is nicely readable. Now, here, maybe we want to rewrite this a little bit. But just the way that it's written now, in this window, okay, folders is not defined. There's some places where we're expecting this thing that should be project folders. And I could actually change those to the shorter names as they appear up there just to make life a little easier. List object has no attribute get. Okay, well now we've busted it hardcore. So let's say project data, get the project data. The folders is the folders key from the project data. If the project data exists, otherwise return none. The path is the Windows project file name, and if we got a path, then split it to get just the path and keep the first part because we don't care about the file name. Here's a list of files. If there aren't any folders, ask the window for its active view. If we got a view and that view has a file name, append that file name to the list of files, then return the list of files. So in the case that there was an active window but the view didn't have a file name, or if there wasn't a view, which I'm pretty sure can't happen, then it just returns the empty list. For folder in project folders, extend window, and we have to pass it the list of project folders, and we have to pass it the project path. So what exactly? Folder.get path none. That's blowing up out here. Oh, because this actually was supposed to be, I fixed it the wrong way. There we go. I think that's more what we want. This one is getting all of the folders. That one's just expanding one particular folder. Now that does not look particularly nice. We could even create, pull this out into something if we cared. So that is the nice list of stuff that we see there for that one. I'm going to close that window because we don't need it. If there's just a folder, we see what that folder is. We can see excludes. We can see path excludes. Over here, we get just the file name. Keep in mind that when this returns a path like this, that means we would actually be finding the contents at that particular path and not something else. And if there is absolutely nothing, you get an empty list. So that is nice. And we might even further in this part say this one, not that one, but that one and that one. And that's all of them. That's just the data. And project folders, project folders, project folders could be folders. And project path, 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 path could be path. Thus. So now it's a little more readable, I think. Now there's one last thing we want to do here because remember in here the folders have a dot on them so they are relative to the current directory of the project path, in which case we want, is this a thing? Common path name manipulations. Let's search in here. Relative. Join, probably not what I was thinking. Return a relative path to a path either from the current directory or from an optional start directory. This is a path computation. The file system is not accessed to confirm the existence or nature of path or start. Defaults to that. Join. So, we might say, oh, can't type. Python determine if path is absolute. Well, maybe I was picking the wrong name. Look, I'm wearing a top hat. Is abs. The file is absolute. There you go. I was going the other way with it. I do that a lot. Return true if path is an absolute path name. This means with a slash. On Windows, it begins with a backslash after chopping off potential drive letter. So good to go there. So we might say here, if, what was it called? Yeah, os.path.isAbs. Then we go into here. Now here we have to determine, is it possible to have a path that is the current path when there's not a project? I think we've already found that that's not the case. When I used the subl command to add dot, the folder as it was added was absolute. It's only a dot if it's in a project. So I think we should be able to say path is equal to os.path.relpath path and project path. Now, I don't know if I actually did that correctly, so let's see. If the folder was dot, if I added the word not, because I only want to do this when it's not absolute, not when it is, doesn't need to be more absolute. That looks like the sort of situation where I guessed incorrectly as to the order of the operations. Still no, huh? I think that might be closer. Let's take a look at it again. Return a path relative to path. So yeah, the path, we want it the way it was the first time, I think, relative to that start location. And if the start location is the packages folder, and why exactly is it the packages folder? Is the project at project path. The project is in local source Devember, and the path dot relative to that is somewhere inside the packages folder. Color me confused that that is not. Return a normalized absolutized version of the path name path. On most platforms, this is equivalent to calling the path file. What? Okay. We'll call that. Let's see what happens. Abs path. This is the sort of thing that I've worked out before, and it tends to confuse me each time. So if the project is at local source Devember, then somehow dot is relative to the actual current working directory and not relative to a current spot, so that does not seem like the sort of thing that is actually useful to us. And if I'm being honest, I wasn't expecting to be stymied by that. Try to think about this logically. We only need to do this here. Make the project path relative to that. What does that do? The project path was relative to the dot path dot, then it ends up being that. I mean, I guess. I guess I do need the abs path thing there. Over here, we end up with the same thing. So maybe that's something that is cool. So we'll just leave that for the time being. It seems kind of sketchy. But that is us gathering all of the information that we need to know about a thing. So now is the part where I remember I pulled something out of do I still have it in here? Did I actually already paste it in here? This thing. os.walk, and we're going to go into now that's unfortunate because that's going to have the same name as that. We absolutely do not want to follow links. I'm pretty sure that that doesn't actually matter anyway. And we might print path dirs and files. Comment those out. For that in this, maybe that works out. I don't know. Let's find out. I'm going to run the command. Look at all the stuff that we found. Boy, that is a lot of stuff because there's a Git folder in here. Stuff we printed. The path that we looked into. The list of directories. The list of files. The path that we looked into. Okay. We're going to comment out that. Do that. Yeah, we need to keep that outer path. So we need to come up with a different name for this. I'm going to change that one. Whoops. Skip that. Skip that. That one we want. That one we want. Skip. 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 Keep. Go like that. Skip that one. 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 Keep that one. Skip. 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 And we'll keep that and go boop. Oh, nope, nope. I wanted to call that search path. So let's just double check. Search path is getting the path from there. And if the search path is absolute, then do that for path dir in search path. And if this was not search path, then that for name and files print. So, and if we do it again, oh, package path is not defined. Whoops, I forget. I missed a spot. Search path. Probably going to need to change that name. There we go. My bad. Should have printed name. There's just a list of stuff. And it does not have any folders crammed onto the start. Oh, because we need to do that. We want name equals os dot path dot join our path name print name. Now, fixed path in override audit is something that knows to fiddle stuff in certain ways because of the way file systems work. So we're going to have to investigate that in just a second. But that is some nice action there. So as per such, we now have a list of files that are relative to the path that we were searching. So this is all the contents in the sidebar. Those are all in the package. And then we hit the Git, and everything that's inside Git to some degree or other is inside the Git folder. See, there are a lot of Git objects and hooks and refs, the contents of the build server. Now, we might say keep subpath file include, file exclude, path include, path exclude. And we'll return true. If keep, and what we're trying to try, if we want to keep the name with file includes and file excludes and path includes and path excludes. Now, of course, this is not particularly nice. Then print the name. So again, that's just telling us exactly what we might have expected. And what we can actually do is do what this actually does here, which is we need a results list and say results.add name. We'll comment that out and return results at this point. We don't need that one anymore. And are you sure list has no attribute add? Because oh, that was a set. Now, right. I believe, I guess in that case, we want that. So now we end up with a little bit of that action. Whoa. Went a little crazy on that one. And let's take out that very quickly. Yeah, that. Where's that defined? References. Doop. Nope. Crunk. We'll go ahead and pull this out. Paths inside of zip files always use path separators of the Unix style, which is problems in Windows because partial file names from Sublime package files don't match files that you detect locally. So this fixed path thing swaps forward slashes for backward slashes. We will, for the time being, just ignore that for our purposes here. It may or may not be necessary to do something special in the next part of this. And let's say we also just comment that out for now. And down here, we say pprint files instead of print, and come up here and say from pprint import pprint. Now, when I run the command, I get a nice list of every file, which is more or less exactly what I was doing with prints, but now we're actually returning the files that someone should do something about. Now, to be sure, this data structure needs to be a little smarter than this because these are all relative to a particular path, and in order to gather these files up, we need to know what that path is, and we have to transmit that path to the other side when we do our operation so that we can the other side can know what the full path here is when it unextracts them there. So when it rewrites error messages, it knows if file names match what to do. Now, the last thing that we could look at here, and I think there is, yeah, that thing. I've searched for this before. Go to that. Test whether the file name string matches the pattern string, returning true or false. If the operating system is case insensitive, then blah, blah. Returns the subset of the list of names that match pattern. It's the same as. That might be a way to go. But we do need special handling. So Unix shell style path expansion. Test whether the file name string matches the pattern string, returning true or false. So I don't actually know if this is going to work with paths, to be perfectly honest. So let's say it was fn match. From fn match, import fn match. It's a function. So if I said fn match and the thing we're passing might be messages.py, does it match the spec star.py? Yes, so we would keep that one. Unless that was a file exclude, in which case we might remove it. So that might be something that we care about. Now, the other thing might be this. If this said net test / messages.py, does this match net test? No. Does it match net test /? No. So that exclusion of folders may be sort of a stickler for us here. If now an example of that might be PyCache is something that is excluded in this folder, right? So, whoops, given the, whoa. Once again, the mouse goes crazy. If this was a file name and we said, if there was a name and it was equal to that, and we said fn match the name to star.pyc, then it would say true. So we would exclude it because that's in the list of file patterns. Does it match PyCache? with 2 underscores. It does not. So could glob help us here? Glob module finds all the path names matching according to the rules used in. Okay, returns a possibly empty list of path names that match, which must be a string. So we don't really want. I'm not sure that this is the sort of thing that we're interested in. Oh, file name, not path expansion. All right. Oh. The file name separator slash on Unix is not special. I don't necessarily want path name expansion so much as I want to know if that appears in the list. I don't know exactly how Sublime implements that, so some testing of that may actually be in order. Because if we said dirs was equal to obj bin and pycache, like so. If I said fixed dirs is equal to the raw string slash percent %s. So, actually, this should go that way, so I don't need it that way. My bad. If we searched for that, for D for D in dirs, then if dirs is that, fixed dirs is that, and then if we said fn match, the name is that, fn match, we already know if I said name and pycache, the answer is false. If this had a slash and this had a slash, then that would have false. But if I said true if pycache in name else false, then that matches. But if the name was equal to something that doesn't have pycache in the name, like enum slash init.py, then that returns false. So that might be how Sublime does it. We could perhaps expand the list of folder exclude patterns to have leading and trailing slashes to C. We could also path split the entire thing up. The other way that I can think of to do that is to say, if name was the longer name that we expect it to be, OS path split name gives you that. So the first argument there is the the path to the file. If we split this apart on slashes, then we would end up with all the segments, and then we could say if any of those segments is in any of these segments. That is something to research, but I think we've made good strides. We have the basis for what we want, because realistically, the only thing that's stopping us from this code that we've implemented actually detecting exactly what files it needs is just this keep method, which needs to determine if a file matches. And imagine here that if file include is a list, then it has to test if it matches. Otherwise, it probably matches unless it also has a file exclude, then it doesn't. And then ditto for path. And maybe we do files before we do paths, because if the file name excludes the thing, then we don't have to do any complicated paths. And as an added bonus, remember that thing that we just saw for FN match. You can use filter to return a subset of the list of names that match a particular pattern. It's implemented more efficiently. There's more than one pattern, so we might want to test and see how much faster it is to call that like 20 times as opposed to doing it ourselves. I imagine we're going to have to do it a bunch of times. But that is all we're going to do for the stream tonight. That's an hour and 15 minutes worth of stuff. And this is not the sort of, well, this is the sort of problem where if I wasn't vlogging and doing stuff, I would probably spend the next 2 hours fiddling around with it and not quite get where I wanted to go, be very unhappy and tired at the end. But because I am recording this and I do have to create a vlog and uh, get to bed, we're going to go ahead and call that quits for now. So tomorrow we're going to continue on with this particular operation and work on being able to match these criteria. And once that's done, we'll be one step closer to knowing what our build is gonna have to do. And we can start thinking of how exactly, we know how we can transmit that data to the other side in binary blobs. That's not that big of a deal. What sort of information is needed to transmit that to the other end? That is the crux of the proverbial biscuit, if you will. So, if you find this sort of thing interesting, then please feel free to join in on the live stream tomorrow, or continue watching the archive if you're watching this in the past and you want to see how this project is going. As I said yesterday, we are very much into the meat of the Python or the package development part of this for the next little bit, getting Sublime ready to actually do something with the code we've already created. Until that point, if you haven't subscribed and you like these things, probably should do that now. Otherwise, or in addition to that, have a Sublime day.